The 11th Plague by Jeff Hirsch, Part 1, Chapter 1. I was sitting at the edge of the clearing, trying not to stare at the body on the ground in front of me. Dad had said we'd be done by dark, but it had been hours since the sun went down, and he was still only waist deep in the hole, throwing shovelfuls of dirt over his shoulder. Even though it was covered in the burlap shroud, I could see how wasted Grandpa's body was. So I'm going to stop for a second and I'm wondering, well, how did Grandpa die? And Dad is the one who is burying Grandpa. Was Grandpa Dad's dad? So that's what I'm wondering. He'd always been thin, but the infection had taken another 10 pounds off him before he went. So I'm making an inference based on a hint that was in the text that Grandpa died from an infection. His hand fell out from a tear in the burlap. Shadowed from the moonlight, it was a desert plain, the tracks of the veins like dry riverbeds winding up the crags of his knuckles. So I like that simile that describing what Grandpa's hand is looking like. So his hand was being compared to a dry riverbed winding up his knuckles, right? A gold Marine Corps ring sat on one finger, but it barely fit anymore. Dad's shovel chewed through rocks and clay with an awful scrape. More figurative language there. The shovel personifying it by saying it chewed through rock and clay. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and escaped into the thicket of trees that surrounded us, stumbling through the darkness until I came to the edge of the hill we were cramped on. Far below were the slouching ruins of an old mall. Rows of cars rusting in the moist air sat in the parking lot, still waiting for the doors to open. Beyond the mall, the arches of McDonald's sign hovered like a ghost. I think there's going to be lots of figurative language in this book. I remembered seeing it for the first time 10 years ago. I was 5, and then the sign had towered in its red and gold plastic. It seemed gigantic and beautiful. 1 trillion served. Now fingers of vines crept up its base, slowly consuming more and more of the rusty metal. I wondered how long it would be until they made it to the top and the whole thing finally collapsed. 10 years? 20? Would I be Dad's age? Grandpa's? I took a breath of the cool air, but the image of Grandpa's hand lying there on the ground loomed in the back of my mind. How could it be so still? Grandpa's hand only made sense in motion, rearing back, the gold flame flashing as it crashed into my cheek. He had so many rules. So I'm going to stop again and pause. So to me, Grandpa was very physical with the main character, whoever is speaking. We don't know his name yet. And I think that Grandpa used to hit him. I could never remember them all, the rules. The simple act of setting up camp was a minefield of mistakes, and Dad and I both seemed to trip over every one. I could still feel the sting of the metal and the rasp of his calloused skin. But that's over, I told myself. We're on our own now. Grandpa's fist was just another bit of wreckage we were leaving behind. Stephen! My chest tightened. It wasn't cold enough for a fire, but I didn't want to go back with nothing to do, so I collected an armful of wood and brush on the way. I dropped it all between our sleeping bags, then leaned over the tinder, scraping the 2 pieces of my fire starter together until a spark caught. Once I had a proper campfire, I sat back on my heels to watch it burn. Think it's deep enough yet? Dad was leaning against the wall of the grave, his body slick with sweat and dirt. I nodded. Come on then, bring the ropes. Once I helped Dad out of the hole, we knelt on either side of Grandpa's body and drew lengths of rope under his knees and back. Dad started to lift him, but I didn't move. Grandpa's hand, one finger, crowned with gold, was only inches from me. What about his ring? The ends of the ropes went limp in Dad's hand. The ring glinted in the firelight. I knew he stung from it just like I did. So I think that means I knew he stung from it just as I did. I'm making another inference based on that sentence. I'm inferring that Dad must have been hit by Grandpa too. There's got to be a half an ounce of gold there, I said, if not more. Let's just do this. But we don't have to. Stephen, now, Dad snapped. We lowered Grandpa into the grave, and then, before I could even pull the ropes out, Dad began filling it in again. I knew I should stop him. We could have traded Grandpa's ring for food, new clothes, even bullets. Dad knew that as well as I did. So I wonder, why are they needing to trade a ring for food, clothes, and bullets? I'm wondering. Based on the cover of this book, remember the cover, it's definitely probably not like a world that we're living in. So maybe that is what folks in this futuristic world have to do to survive. When the grave was filled, the shovel slipped from Dad's hands and he fell to his knees, doubling over with his arms around his stomach. His body seized with small tremors. Oh, God, don't let him be sick too. I reached out to him. Dad? When he turned, the light caught tears cutting channels through the dirt on his face. I turned towards the woods as he sobbed, giving him what privacy I could, a knot twisting tighter and tighter inside me. When he was done, I laid his favorite flannel shirt over his shoulders. Dad drew it around him with a shaky breath, then searched the stars through red, swollen eyes. I swear, he exhaled, that man was a purebred son of a gun. Maybe we should put that on his tombstone. Dad surprised me with a short, explosive laugh. I sat beside him, edging my body alongside the steady in and out of his breath. He draped his arm, exhausted, over my shoulder. It felt good, but still the knot in my stomach refused to unravel. Dad? Yes, Steve? We'll be okay, won't we? Without him? When Dad said nothing, I moved out from under his arm and looked up at him. I mean, nothing's going to change, right? Dad fixed his eyes past me and onto the dark trail we would start down the next morning. No, he said, his words rising up like ghosts, thin and pale and empty. Nothing's ever going to change. Okay, that was chapter 1.